What's happening with the religious liberty language?
Ongoing discussions, Bob. We're having, there's a lot of, you've heard me say this, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, but there are people that have worked over the years in this space of anti-discrimination and religious liberties. And it's important that, I think up here, and I think we all know this as we watch this process, people are going to be a part of this process regardless. And so if you know that people are going to be involved, what you'd like to do is have as much conversation together and as much collaboration as possible. And so I think that's what that's the phase we are still in, where we're trying to still bring interested parties together to kind of talk about some of the legislation. I don't know if we'll have many bills yet or one. I couldn't even tell you at this point who main sponsors of that kind of legislation would be. But the good news is there's some very constructive conversation going on, which is what you want if you're going to get a bill that has a chance of passing.
You run out of time here.
I've heard.
So what kind of deadlines are you giving people?
I haven't actually done the math yet to know how limited we are, so I haven't issued any drop dead dates myself. But we're all sensitive to the timing of it.
I don't know how much you've been involved in the specifics of the negotiation, but there seems to be differing opinions on how broadly the religious liberties component should be cast. Should it be limited to employment and housing, since that's where the discrimination protection is focused, or should it be cast broader to public accommodations, businesses, et cetera? Do you have thoughts on what the scope of the religious liberties protection should be?
You know what, I think we need to be really careful in that space, and I think that a measured approach would be the best approach. That said, there's legal minds that understand these issues better than I am. I think there's, like I said, I think there's some good negotiations or discussions going on that I think will land on a solution there. But here's my personal perspective is this. I grew up in a community where I was the religious minority. There were not a lot of Mormons in Southwest Pennsylvania. Our 8th grade history class talked about Mormon pioneers that moved went across the West, and the girl in front of me said, "Are there any of those Mormons left now?" And I tapped her on the shoulder and said, "I'm a Mormon." And she said, "Would you shut up? It's a serious question." And she didn't want to believe me. She thought I was being a class clown, which I might have been guilty of, but I was being serious, and she didn't believe me. So I grew up in a predominantly Catholic community. You have CCD, which is equivalent to maybe seminary here in Utah. First Communion is a big party and a big event, and there's a lot of parties and things that go on with your schoolmates that if you're not of that faith, you aren't invited or you're not a part of. And so I have felt what it's like to be a religious minority, even within my own family. My mother was a convert, and so there were some strong opinions about the LDS faith even within my own family. And so you want to be careful when you talk about religious liberties. You don't want to see examples, or you don't want to, just want to be careful that there aren't unintended consequences. And I think members of the LDS faith, where predominantly most members of the LDS faith are religious minorities in most parts of the world, there ought to be some empathy to that and some perspective with that. So we got to be careful what we call religious liberty. But I will tell you this, being able to worship according to the dictates of your conscience, being able to express your religious beliefs should not be hindered. It should not be something that you feel through, because of societal pressure that you can't express. I mean, if not in this country, exactly where. You see some really disturbing images and stories around the world about the brutality around religion and how people are being treated or, frankly, killed in the name of religion. And so in this country, we better make sure that your expression of your religious beliefs are paramount.
So hypothetically, someone who provides flowers for weddings, should they be able to choose not to do a certain type of wedding based on their religious beliefs?
And I've thought about this Senator DeBacchus says if there's a caterer that doesn't want to cater a same-sex marriage, you really wouldn't want to measure caterer. And I think that some of these decisions that would be made would have some consequences, even economically, if you were to go that route. I guess I think that we ought to have reasonable consideration for people's religious beliefs, but I would worry about maybe making that a business, allowing for businesses to refuse service based on certain beliefs. However, I think if you're an employee or you're somebody who has a belief and there's a reasonable accommodation in terms of what you believe, and if there was a conflict, if you could find someone to take your shift or do something, as long as there's an overall policy that would allow all employees that flexibility to find someone to take their shift, that it should be accommodated for. So it's more involved than just should they be able to deliver flowers or provide flowers for a wedding for a same-sex couple. But I do think I think when I hear that example, Glenn, I just go back to forget about whether it's for religion or for the makeup of someone's household. Let's just come up with policies that you could interchange what it is that is weighing on someone's mind, whether it's how they worship or how they live. And let's make sure we're not mistreating and not excluding them or putting people in circumstances that would contradict what it is that they hold dear.
Representative Chavez Hauk is very close to presenting the Utah Die with Dignity Act, otherwise known as Right to Die. I know you obviously haven't had a chance to look at that bill and see what's in it, but in general, should someone who is terminally ill and of their own mindset be able to make a decision to end it the way they want to?
Yeah, if it's a typical euthanasia debate, I have not in the past been in favor of that type of legislation. But I've lived through a couple of end of life scenarios with loved ones, and I don't see the bright line that you can legislate around on that topic. We as a family had to make some difficult decisions for a loved one, and those aren't easy. And I think there are ways to keep someone comfortable as they are passing away. But the right to die, or we haven't said the name Kevorkian in a long time, but kind of that, when I say it's time, it's time. I don't know. It's just it's a hard. I'd have to read the bill, but it's a hard thing. It's a hard policy to legislate, I believe.
So when you say in the past you haven't been supportive of it, you're not necessarily saying that in this point without having read it?
Yeah, that's right. I need to read the bill and understand what the bill's contemplating and see if it's the traditional argument of euthanasia, if there's some circumstances that it's addressing that I'm not aware of.
Let's do a couple more questions.
She knows it'll probably be a likely uphill battle in the Utah House. Do you think that would be the case as well?
I do. I think it's hard because, again, there are bright lines in many cases when we talk about end of life and how those decisions, how families and individuals arrive at those decisions. And so it's a sketchy place for us as lawmakers to come in and start making some statewide policy regarding it. It just feels, it's just difficult.
Have there been any, you said you didn't want to talk about Healthy Utah or Utah
Yeah,
Cares.
have you seen this as a Healthy Utah free press availability, Robert? That's it there?
That's it.
Oh, no, come on, guys, get creative, what
I
else?
was just gonna ask if there's any update, anything new that we should know, or is it just sort of?
There isn't any update at this time.
One thing I'm kind of curious about on that level, from your personal experience, what are you hearing mostly from your constituents on Healthy Utah? And do they suggest
This is
you
probably gonna
support
bait
it?
me into a big response that I haven't had up until now. There's been some coordinated efforts from advocacy groups to help encourage people to reach out to their legislators, but some of those are form letters, and not to discount them, but that there are advocacy groups that are out there encouraging members of the public to contact their lawmakers, and I've had some of those. But I visited this issue in my town hall meeting, and there was not an overriding sentiment that we should be doing this, signing up for Healthy Utah necessarily. It's a complicated issue. It's one that's best, I think, visited in a town hall meeting versus a questionnaire that you would send out to constituents or some of the quick descriptions of Healthy Utah that sometimes the only way we have to convey the idea is through maybe blurbs. It's very, very involved. If you have the time to kind of go through the scenarios and the work that's being done up here to try and get our heads around it, I think people leave that discussion with an understanding of how complex it is and how it's not an easy decision. I think some people would want to frame it as it's a no-brainer. It certainly is not a no-brainer. It is a very difficult issue. It's a generational decision. And again, it weighs heavy on the minds of House members. If you decide to go into this area that we currently don't provide coverage, you better mean what you say. You better be able to pay the bills. You better be able to provide coverage as you voted. And we're not sure that that's the case. So it's hard. It's a difficult issue. Yeah.
Okay, thanks guys.